Chapter 7. The Wraith of Ilarion. The evening sky bled into a rich tapestry of deep purples and blues as the company finally found a suitable spot to set up camp. The journey had been grueling, but the glimmering lake was now behind them, and Ilarion was just within reach. The ancient city, with its towering spires and crumbling walls, loomed in the distance like a ghost from another age, a silent sentinel guarding secrets long forgotten. Arik led the group to a clearing nestled within a grove of towering oaks. The trees, ancient and wise, seemed to form a natural barrier around them, offering both protection and a sense of seclusion. The air was crisp and cool, carrying the scent of pine and damp earth, a soothing balm to their weary souls. Bromir and Thargrim immediately set to work, their practiced hands swiftly building a fire pit and gathering wood. Despite their gruff exteriors, the dwarf brothers had an unspoken understanding, each move synchronized as if they were one. Lyriel, with her delicate features softened by the dim light, began to draw runes in the dirt around the camp, creating a protective barrier to ward off any malevolent forces. Seraphine and Darian, meanwhile, scouted the perimeter, ensuring that no threats lurked in the shadows. As the fire crackled to life, sending sparks dancing into the night, the company settled around it, their faces illuminated by the warm glow. The flickering flames reflected in their eyes, revealing not just the fatigue of their journey, but also the bonds that had begun to form between them. Bromir, ever the pragmatist, was the first to break the silence. "Aye, that was a fine scrap back in the pass. Those cursed spirits put up a decent fight, but they weren't much compared to what we've faced before." Thargrim grunted in agreement as he passed a flask of strong dwarven ale to his brother. "Aye, but I could feel the weight of their sorrow. They weren't just spirits, they were warriors, like us, bound by something darker than death." Arik nodded, his expression thoughtful. "They fought bravely, even in death. It's a reminder of what we're up against. This darkness isn't just an enemy, it's a force that corrupts everything it touches." Lyriel looked up from her runes, her voice soft yet clear. "The darkness feeds on despair and anger, twisting it into something monstrous. The ironclad warriors were once honorable, but their souls were ensnared by the very force we seek to defeat. It's why we must be vigilant, not just against the creatures we face, but against the darkness within ourselves." Seraphine, returning from her patrol, sat down beside Lyriel, her bow resting across her lap. "And what about you, Lyriel? You've been quiet since we left the lake. Is something troubling you?" Lyriel hesitated, her gaze lingering on the fire. The Seraph's trials were not just tests of strength. They were a reflection of our fears and regrets. I saw my ancestors, questioning my choices, my path. It's not something I can easily forget. Darian, sitting across from her, nodded understandingly. The Seraph's trials were meant to challenge us, to see if we were worthy. But they were also a reminder of what we're fighting for. Our pasts, our histories. They shape who we are, but they don't define our future. We do that. Arik looked around the group, seeing the camaraderie that had formed through their shared hardships. These were not just allies, they were becoming something more. "We all have our burdens," he said, his voice steady. "But we carry them together. That's what makes us strong. Whatever we face in Ilarion, we face it as one." Bromir raised his flask in a silent toast, and the others followed suit, their spirits lifted by the shared resolve. Suddenly, a low, mocking laugh cut through the night air, startling the group. Out of the shadows, a figure emerged, her movements fluid and silent as a cat. Callista, the young high mage, stepped into the circle of light cast by the fire, a smirk playing on her lips. "Well, well," she drawled, her voice laced with amusement. "If I could sneak up on you so easily, what does that say about your defenses? If I were a Night Stalker, you'd all be dead by now." Arik shot to his feet, his hand instinctively going to his sword. The others followed suit, weapons drawn, eyes scanning the darkness for more unseen threats. But Callista merely laughed, holding up her hands in a gesture of mock surrender. "Oh, relax, Your Highness," she said, her tone dripping with sarcasm. "If I wanted you dead, we wouldn't be having this delightful little chat. Besides, you'd make a terrible ghost. Too uptight, I'm sure." Arik's eyes narrowed, but before he could retort, Callista turned her attention to the group, her expression shifting to one of exaggerated seriousness. "Honestly, what would you lot do without me? I heard about your little quest and figured you'd need someone with actual talent to bail you out. So, here I am, ready to save the day." Bromir frowned, his grip on his axe tightening. "And what makes you think we need your help, mage? We've managed fine without you so far." Callista's eyes sparkled with mischief as she sauntered over to Bromir, poking him lightly on the chest. "Oh, I'm sure you've done wonderfully. Like when you nearly got skewered by that spirit back at the pass. Or when Lyriel almost burned us all alive trying to light a campfire." She winked at Lyriel, who flushed with a mix of embarrassment and irritation. Lyriel crossed her arms, glaring at Callista. "That was one time." "Exactly," Callista replied, her grin widening. "One time too many." Seraphine, who had been watching the exchange with a bemused expression, finally spoke up. "And what exactly do you bring to the table, Callista? Besides your charming personality, of course." "Oh, you know," Callista said with a casual shrug. "Just a little thing called being a magical prodigy. Also, I'm a master of hand-to-hand combat, so when your precious arrows run out, I'll be the one saving your pretty little necks." She paused, her gaze flicking to Arik, and her smirk deepened. "And let's not forget my delightful sense of humour. Someone has to keep things light around here. Don't worry, Prince Arik. I'll make sure you don't get too stiff from all that royal responsibility." Arik's jaw tightened, but before he could respond, Darian chuckled, shaking his head. "Well, you certainly don't lack confidence, but if you're here to help, I won't turn you away. We'll need all the help we can get." Callista's demeanour softened slightly at Darian's words, though her eyes still danced with mirth. "That's the spirit. I knew there was a reason I liked you." Lyriel, still wary but recognizing the truth in Callista's words, sighed and nodded. "Fine, you can join us. But remember, this isn't a game. What we're facing in Ilarion, it's not like anything we've encountered before." Callista's playful expression faltered for a moment, and her voice grew serious. "I know, Lyriel. I wouldn't be here if I didn't think I could help. The darkness in Ilarion, it's powerful, and I'm not just here for the fun of it. We're going to need every bit of strength and cunning to survive what's ahead." Arik studied her for a moment, the firelight casting shadows across his face. Finally, he nodded. "All right, Callista, you're with us? But understand this is a dangerous mission. We can't afford any distractions." Callista raised an eyebrow, her smirk returning. "Oh, don't worry, Your Highness. I'll be the least of your distractions. At least if you can keep your eyes off me, of course." She added the last with a playful wink, her tone dripping with flirtatious teasing. Arik stiffened at her words, his expression hardening as a faint flush crept up his neck. He quickly averted his gaze, focusing intently on the fire, as if it held the answer to some great mystery. "I'll keep that in mind," he replied, his voice clipped, trying to maintain his composure. But the subtle tension in his posture betrayed his discomfort, as if her words had struck a nerve he wasn't prepared to confront. With that, Callista settled down by the fire, a satisfied grin playing on her lips. Her presence, though still new, was already altering the group's dynamic. The initial tension lingered in the air, yet it was accompanied by an unspoken acknowledgement that she was here to help, and that her skills, both magical and otherwise, would be invaluable. As the night wore on, the group gradually relaxed, the banter resuming, albeit with a bit more edge thanks to Callista's sharp tongue. But beneath the humour and the jabs, there was a growing sense of camaraderie. They were a mismatched group, each with their own strengths and flaws, but they were united by a common purpose. And with Callista's unexpected arrival, their chances of success, however slim, seemed just a bit brighter. The morning sun broke through the dense canopy of trees, casting a soft, dappled light on the group as they made their way through the ancient forest. The air was thick with the scent of pine and damp earth, but a strange, lingering chill clung to the air, a foreboding omen of the darkness that lay ahead. Arik led the way, his hand resting on the hilt of his sword as he navigated the narrow path. The forest around them was unnaturally quiet, as if the very life of the woods had been drained away by the proximity of the once great city they sought. Behind him, the others followed in a somber procession. Bromir and Thargrim walked side by side, their expressions grim as they exchanged wary glances, while Seraphine and Darian moved with the stealth and grace of seasoned hunters, their eyes constantly scanning the surroundings. Lyriel's steps were deliberate, her face serene, but her grip on her staff was tight, betraying her unease. And then there was Callista, bringing up the rear, her eyes gleaming with curiosity as she observed her companions. Despite the tense atmosphere, a slight smirk played on her lips, as if she found amusement in the grim determination of the group. She had been with them only a short time, but already her presence had made itself known, both with her sharp tongue and her undeniable magical prowess. Finally, after what felt like hours of trekking through the oppressive forest, the trees began to thin, revealing glimpses of crumbling stone and overgrown ruins. The ancient city of Ilarion loomed ahead, a haunting silhouette against the sky. Once a beacon of elven civilization, it was now a shadow of its former glory, its grandeur consumed by the relentless passage of time and the encroaching darkness that had taken hold. The group emerged from the forest, stepping onto a wide, cracked road that led to the city's entrance. The road was lined with the remnants of ancient statues, their features worn away by centuries of neglect, leaving only ghostly shapes that hinted at their former splendor. The walls of Ilarion rose before them, towering and impenetrable, though they were marred by deep cracks and the invasive roots of trees that had claimed the city as their own. "By the gods," Thargrim muttered, his voice low as he took in the sight. "This place, it's like a tomb." "It's more than that," Lyriel said softly, her voice tinged with sorrow. "Ilarion was once a place of light and knowledge, a symbol of everything the elves stood for. But now, it's a testament to our failures, to the darkness that corrupted our hearts." Bromir grunted, his hand tightening around the haft of his axe. "No use dwelling on the past. We're here to find the scepter and end this darkness once and for all." Arik nodded, though his gaze remained fixed on the city ahead. "Let's move. Stay close and keep your wits about you. Ilarion may be in ruins, but that doesn't mean it's safe." The group approached the gates, which hung slightly ajar, their once mighty wood splintered and decayed. The entrance was shrouded in shadows, the darkness within seeming to pulse with a life of its own. Arik led the way, his sword drawn, as they stepped into the city. The moment they crossed the threshold, a palpable sense of dread washed over them, as if the city itself was watching, waiting for them to make a wrong move. The streets were narrow and winding, lined with the remnants of buildings that had long since crumbled into ruin. Vines and moss clung to every surface, creeping over the stones like the tendrils of some malevolent force. The air was thick with the smell of decay, and the faint echoes of their footsteps seemed to be swallowed by the oppressive silence. As they ventured deeper into the city, the group remained tense, their weapons at the ready. Every shadow seemed to shift, every breeze carrying whispers that sent shivers down their spines. But there was no sign of life. Only the ruins of a once great civilization, now reduced to nothing more than a decaying husk. It's too quiet, Seraphine murmured, her bow drawn and an arrow nocked. I don't like it. It's the city's magic, Lyriel explained, her voice barely above a whisper. Ilarion was built on ancient ley lines, a nexus of magical energy. That power still lingers, but it's been corrupted, twisted by the darkness that consumed the city. Well, it's certainly doing a good job of making me want to turn back, Bromir muttered, though he didn't slow his pace. We're not turning back, Arik said firmly. The scepter is here somewhere, and we're going to find it. As they rounded a corner, they came upon what had once been a grand marketplace, now a desolate expanse of cracked stones and toppled stalls. In the centre of the square stood a massive obelisk, its surface etched with runes that glowed with a faint, sickly light. The air around it seemed to hum with energy, the very ground vibrating beneath their feet. That's it, Darian said, his voice tense. That's the source of the magic. Before they could react, the ground beneath them began to shake violently, and with a deafening roar, the obelisk pulsed with light, sending shockwaves through the square. The stones around it began to rise, forming into massive hulking shapes. Golems made of earth and stone, their eyes glowing with an unnatural fire. Get ready, Arik shouted, raising his sword as the golems advanced. The battle was fierce and chaotic. Bromir and Thargrim charged forward, their axes cleaving through the golems with all the force they could muster, but for every one they destroyed, another would rise from the rubble. Seraphine's arrows flew true, striking at the golem's weak points, while Darian darted between the lumbering creatures, his twin daggers flashing in the dim light. Lyriel's voice rang out in a chant, her magic crackling through the air as she called down lightning to shatter the golems into dust. But no matter how many they destroyed, the obelisk continued to pulse, summoning more of the creatures to defend it. Callista stood back, watching the chaos with a calculating eye. Then, with a smirk, she raised her hands, her fingers weaving a complex pattern in the air. A moment later, a burst of fiery energy erupted from her hands, slamming into the obelisk with the force of a battering ram. The obelisk cracked, the runes flickering as the magic within it faltered. The golems froze, their forms crumbling into piles of inert stone as the obelisk's power was disrupted. That's more like it, Callista said, dusting off her hands with a satisfied grin. Arik sheathed his sword, breathing heavily as he surveyed the ruins around them. We need to find the scepter before this city throws something else at us. Lyriel approached the obelisk, examining the runes with a frown. The magic here is ancient, older than anything I've ever seen. The scepter must be close, but it won't be easy to reach. There are wards and traps all over this place, designed to keep intruders out. Then we'll just have to be careful, Darian said, his voice steady. We've come this far. We're not turning back now. With renewed determination, the group pressed on, leaving the shattered remains of the golems behind. The streets grew narrower and more twisted as they approached the heart of the city, where the grand palace of Ilarion stood. The palace was a looming, foreboding structure, its once grand towers now crumbling and overgrown with vines. The gates were sealed by a barrier of magic, a shimmering wall of light that pulsed with an ominous energy. This is it, Arik said, his voice low. The scepter is inside. We just need to find a way through. Lyriel studied the barrier, her brow furrowed in concentration. This magic is powerful, but I think I can break through it. It will take time, though. You'll need to protect me while I work. Consider it done, Bromir said, hefting his axe with a determined look. As Lyriel began her incantation, the group formed a protective circle around her, their eyes scanning the shadows for any sign of danger. The air was thick with tension, every breath seeming to echo in the silence. Minutes passed, and the barrier began to waver, cracks appearing in its surface as Lyriel's magic took hold. But just as it seemed they were about to succeed, A low, rumbling growl echoed through the streets, sending a chill down their spines. From the darkness emerged a massive, hulking figure, its form obscured by the shadows. It was unlike anything they had seen before, a creature of pure darkness, its body shifting and writhing as if it were made of the very essence of the void. Arik's heart raced as he gripped his sword tighter. "Prepare yourselves!" The creature lunged at them with a speed that belied its size, its claws slashing through the air. Bromir and Thargrim met it head-on, their axes swinging with all the strength they could muster. Seraphine's arrows flew true, striking the creature's shifting form, while Darian moved with deadly precision, his daggers finding purchase in the creature's dark flesh. But no matter how many blows they landed, the creature seemed to absorb the damage, its form growing larger and more menacing with each passing moment. The darkness around them seemed to thicken, pressing in on all sides as if the city itself was coming alive. Callista watched the battle with narrowed eyes, her mind racing. Then, with a sudden burst of inspiration, she stepped forward, her hands glowing with a strange, pulsing light. "Get out of the way!" she shouted, her voice carrying an edge of urgency. The others barely had time to react before Callista unleashed a torrent of pure, radiant energy, aimed directly at the creature's core. The light pierced through the darkness, searing the creature with an intensity that made it shriek in pain. For a moment it seemed as if the creature might withstand the attack, but then, with a final agonized howl, it dissolved into a cloud of shadow, dissipating into the night. The barrier around the palace shattered at the same time, the magical energy fading into the air like smoke. Lyriel staggered slightly, exhausted from the effort, but her eyes shone with triumph. "We did it," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Arik sheathed his sword, his chest heaving as he tried to catch his breath. "Let's move before anything else decides to show up. The scepter is in there, and we're getting closer." With renewed resolve, the group stepped through the now open gates of the palace, their eyes set on the darkened halls ahead. The shadows seemed to close in around them as they ventured deeper into the heart of Ilarion, but they pressed on, driven by the knowledge that the end of their journey was within reach. Yet, as they moved forward, a sense of unease settled over them. The palace was filled with the echoes of the past, the whispers of a darkness that had not yet been fully vanquished. The scepter was close, but so too was the danger that had brought Ilarion to its knees. And in the depths of the palace, something ancient and powerful stirred, sensing the presence of those who dared to challenge its dominion. The grand hall of Ilarion's palace stretched before the group like a vast, ancient cavern. The chamber's high, vaulted ceiling was lost in darkness, while the flickering torchlight illuminated the dust that had settled over centuries. Massive pillars draped in cobwebs held up the weight of the ruinous structure. The atmosphere was thick with the scent of aged wood and forgotten magic. In the centre of the room stood an imposing door, its surface adorned with intricate carvings depicting celestial symbols and mythological creatures. At its centre, a large, ornate keyhole was framed by elaborate runes that pulsed faintly with a bluish light. The door seemed to beckon them, its grandeur almost challenging their resolve. Arik approached the door and studied it closely. "It looks like we've hit another obstacle. We need to figure out how to open this door." Lyriel examined the runes and carvings. "There's definitely something more to this. The riddle will probably reveal the way forward." As if in answer, a deep, resonant voice filled the chamber, its tone both mysterious and ancient. "To open the path you seek, solve this riddle unique. I am the beginning of everything, the end of everywhere. I'm the beginning of eternity, the end of time and space. What am I?" The voice faded, leaving the group in a heavy silence. They exchanged glances, their minds already turning over the riddle. Great, a riddle.